It's an honor to be with you today. Our topic is a tale of two plans. You know, the world has a lot of definitions for being wise or foolish. Well, it's important to know that Jesus had some definitions for that as well. We live in a time where words are being redefined. Marriage is being redefined. Human sexuality is being redefined. You can be confused about things that we didn't even know was possible to be confused about. So the definitions you accept have an enormous impact upon your life choices. I would submit to you that it is a better decision to let Jesus define what is a wise choice and what's a foolish choice. If we'll take His counsel, I believe it will stand the test of all eternity, and that's a pretty good outcome. Grab your Bible and get a notepad, but most of all, open your heart. Let's accept God's definitions for our lives today. We've been working through this little series that are really kind of a comparison between perspectives or vantage points or life choices. We're going to continue that in this session as well. I'd like to talk to you about the tale of two plans. I like plans. You know, before COVID, we used to build an annual plan. If you'd wake me from a dead sleep and tell me what week of the year it was, I could tell you what the church team would be working on. Long-term planning for us these days is maybe 3 weeks, and it will get amended twice. The world we live in is just different. But there are some truths that extend beyond the changes of our day-to-day activities. You know, daylight savings time is a big change. You know, up until a week ago, I could tell you pretty much what time of day it was by looking out the window. Now I have no clue. I just know I'm sleepy. So change can be very disruptive. But this notion of two plans is really built out of some counsel that Jesus gave us. In James chapter 1 and verse 5, it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. You know, for many years, the most consistent prayer I have prayed over my life is that I would have God's wisdom, because I've been very conscious and aware that I was in over my head, that I need outcomes that I didn't learn in a classroom, that didn't come from a book I read, that are more significant than training I've had. I need God's wisdom. But the good news about that equation is the scripture very clearly says if we'll ask God, He'll give us His wisdom. Now, it's not quite that simple. In Proverbs, it says we have to search for it. We have to mine for God's wisdom, much like we would have to mine for precious metals, which means there can be some effort involved in that. But God's wisdom is available to every one of us. How many think God's wisdom might be helpful in the world we're living in these days? You know, we don't have a lot of trustworthy sources of information, but God's wisdom is consistent. Now, Jesus has given us some counsel, and this is really the passage that this whole study started for me with. It's in Matthew 7 and verse 24. It's a familiar parable, I suspect, to most of us. Jesus said, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it didn't fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And the rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Two options, pretty clear. The primary distinguishing factor isn't the house, the design of the house, the color scheme. The distinguishing feature is the foundation. Jesus said one is built on a rock, one's built on sand. And the image is unpacked. He said, if you put into practice His words, you build your life on a stable foundation. But if you don't put them into practice, you can know them, you can hear them, you can study them, you can lead groups and attend church and be a faithful participant. You can do many things and not put the Word of God into practice in your life. It's not a smorgasbord. You can't take the 10 Commandments and choose 1, 3, 5, and 7. You see, Jesus is either Lord of our entire life or He's not Lord at all. You can't be just a little immoral. That's an awkward thing for the church because we've tolerated so much ungodliness. We think, well, I'm a good person. Well, I mean, except, for the immorality. Or I'm really a kind person. Well, I mean, except for the fact that I'm greedy and filled with envy. And we've imagined that there's this gray middle, and Jesus doesn't introduce that into the equation. So the discussion, and what I really want to ask you to think about far beyond our time together, is which plan is it that you're building your life upon? Because I can tell you this, if you don't have the intent, it's highly improbable you'll ever get to the outcome. So if you don't intend to be more godly tomorrow and next week than you were today and last week, it's probably not going to be happening. What are you planning for? I know we're in church and the right answer is Jesus, but in the quiet places of your heart, what are you building your life on? I think it's a more important question today than it's been in recent years or decades, because the change that's being introduced into our world is going to change our futures. The lives that we led before we were introduced to that virus from China, I don't think are returning to us in the near future. And I don't think the changes that have been introduced to us are complete yet. I think there'll be new vehicles used to introduce additional changes. There'll be new points to introduce fear and anxiety and stress. So it's a very important question. What are you building your life on? Now that's Jesus' counsel to build it on by practicing the Word of God as you know it. You don't have to agree with me, but as you know it. Now he gave us a warning that's equally stern, again in the Gospels. This is Luke 12. Jesus said, watch out and be on your guard against all kinds of greed. That's a pretty stern warning from Jesus. Watch out, be on your guard against every kind of greed. Now, since we live in one of the most affluent societies that the world has ever known, we have to acknowledge this is a very prevalent challenge for us. We are marketed to by more voices than perhaps any people that have ever lived on the planet. And the goal of that is to make us discontent with what we have. We need more of something or a new something. I mean, it's even true amongst, we have the New International Version and the New American Standard Version and the New King James Version. We just blew right past the International Version and the American Standard Version and the King James. New and improved has invaded the church too. Notions like a fair day's wage for a fair day's work or a fair profit seem quaint. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then he told them this parable. The parable is a story to illustrate the point. He's made the point. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I'll store all my grain and my goods, and I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. Now, Jesus in that last sentence expanded, I think, a bit our imagination of what it means to think about greed. He said the ambition of our life should be to store up riches towards God, not to accumulate things. Now, again, this is a private, personal, it's for your reflection. I didn't bring you a standard to tell you this much is too much, because I don't think that's appropriate. But you know what the ambition of your life is. You know what it is that you imagine secures your place in the world, that gives you entree to the discussions where you want to be included. You know where your self-worth is grounded. If you don't, you need to think about it and pray about it until the Holy Spirit helps you understand it, because you're deceived. That confusion is every bit as devastating and as disorienting as confusion about your biological sex. If you're too confused to understand what the ambition of your life is, there's very little chance that you can have an ambition for the kingdom of God. It's a pretty stern warning from Jesus. What intrigues me is the man he described, we would welcome into any religious setting I'm familiar with. He's not described as being immoral. He's not described of committing some blatant, gross sin. He just has very little spiritual awareness. Now, Jesus is presenting this to a first century Jewish audience who are steeped in religious behaviors and practices, and they identify with man. He's not telling them a story they don't understand. The character of this parable is us. His decisions are logical. They're understandable, bumper crop after bumper crop after bumper crop. Growth of the business year upon year upon year is so remarkable. I don't know what I'm going to do with everything I'm accumulating. I'll have to think in new ways. We'll have to reorganize, restructure. And yet God's assessment of that person is he said he's a fool. Now, I don't know if he has your attention, but he has mine. If you ask me for a biblical word that describes the character of that individual, it wouldn't be just greedy, it's carnal. Worldly. Just invested, overly invested in the systems of this present world order. He's better at it than most folks. And God said that's a foolish way to live. So if I was looking for a kind of a one-line summary, and I was because I wrote the outline, I think we could put it this way: carnal is not the best filter to look at the world through. How you define success, how you define achievement, how you articulate whether you're doing well in business or not, because we're all engaged in that in one way or another, should be different than the people who don't have a biblical worldview. If we're competing by the same rules and evaluating ourselves by the same metrics, it seems to me we're standing dangerously close to Jesus' warning of being considered foolish. And I don't want the creator of heaven and earth to consider us foolish. So this notion of wise or foolish is going to be determined by Jesus' counsel. He's given us some warnings. I could have brought you more. In fact, we may unpack them more in some other sessions. But I'd add to that I believe we are currently responding in a new world order. If your faith isn't different today than it was 2 years ago, you have missed the alarm clock. If the practice of your faith is not markedly different, if your pursuit of God, the time you spend in His Word, the way you pray, how you pray, with whom you pray, if it isn't markedly different than it was 2 years ago, I don't think you heard the clue phone. So I liked it pretty well the way it was. I'm not arguing that, and I'm not suggesting that there was something inappropriate. I'm just telling you things have shifted dramatically. We can talk about it in seasonal change, and the move from winter to spring is a new wardrobe and a new set of behaviors. It's planting season now in Tennessee. If you want those wonderful new potatoes and green beans and fresh tomatoes in a few weeks, it's about time to get busy. If you'd done that in November, we'd have just laughed at you. And it's a different time. I believe there's a harvest opportunity in the kingdom of God that's different than we had 2 years ago. There are open doors and open hearts and people that will respond that would not have responded 2 years ago. And there's some people desperately trying not to notice. We shouldn't be surprised. This is very biblical, and we can expand this more than I'll take the time to do right now. But in Revelation 21, it's very near the end of the book. In verse 4, it says, God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Won't that be a good day? You know, there's no resolution to the human suffering that exists on planet Earth other than the return of the Prince of Peace. NATO's not going to do that. The UN won't do that. The Green New Deal won't do that. There's no political party that will do that. And the one group of people that are given an assignment to bring that to completion is that the gospel of the kingdom has to be preached in the whole world. That's the churches. So our attention to that will either accelerate or retard that event that's in front of us. How serious are we with that? He'll wipe every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And he was seated on the throne and said, I'm making everything new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. I'm making everything new. We're watching a lot of systems that we've had tremendous trust in, that we've relied on for decades, that have defined our futures, that would allow us to project and anticipate things for our children and our grandchildren and beyond that because of the stability of the institutions that we knew. We're watching them being shaken so violently that our trust in them is being withdrawn. And you need to understand that God has said, I'm going to make everything new. I'm making everything new. Now, between here and there is going to be disruption. Between where we currently stand and God making everything new, there's going to be a tremendous amount of realignment. In the plainest of language, the present world order is falling apart. Does that sound right? I was talking to somebody before church. They were talking about when they were young, and they said, we used to walk to the neighborhood church. I said, yes, when I started my public education, I walked to school. More than a block by myself, first grader. Says something about what my parents thought about me, doesn't it? No, there were dozens and dozens of us walking to school. Now you pick your kids up at school, and between the door when they leave the building and get in your car, there's multiple security guards watching. So for all of our dialogue about children and our concern for children, and our value for children and the safety of the children, they're much less safe. I mean, we strap them in car seats until they're old enough to drive the car. Well, I'm not opposed to that, but I remember back in the day where the car seat was the parent's arm doing this the whole time. I remember that. Scary stuff. The world system is falling apart. What do we do in that? What do we do as Christ followers? Well, I believe Jesus' counsel matters. Within me, in recent weeks, something seems to be changing. There's a shift. I feel like I've spent the past months and the last couple of years issuing warnings regarding possibilities. We need to change. We need to respond differently. We need to alter our behaviors so God can look upon us with mercy. And we can avoid so many things. And I don't know what the threshold on that is. I don't know what the Mendoza line is for enough people responding to God that He looks at us with mercy. But I have the most acute sense these days, an urgency in me to say it's time we have to prepare for the changing realities around us. I wish it was as simple as mask mandates going away or COVID receding and flu once again being diagnosed. But it's not that simple. And I think as God's people, we have to prepare differently than we were preparing 3 and 4 years ago. You know, storm warnings are a part of our lives these days. Our weather forecasting ability. I don't know if our weather forecasting ability has improved or our warning ability has improved, but we're warned a lot better. But you know, it's really too late to prepare once the storm arrives. Can't be putting plywood on the windows when the hurricane winds are blowing. And we're in one of those unique seasons where we're right on the cusp of the changes being present with us, where it's not about preparing any longer, it's about being prepared to go through. You know, and if I use the biblical word, it's tribulation, and I'm not talking about the ultimate tribulation, because between here and that, there's a great deal of disruption to be introduced. We're not going to get to all things made new without all the old things being disrupted. It's just logic. So there's big trouble ahead of us. The simplest definition for tribulation is big trouble. You see it. We try not to think about it. Lawlessness around us is escalating on a daily basis. Our southern border is still open. Millions of people poured across it last year. In the first quarter of this year, there's almost a 30% increase. It will change. It is changing our lives. It'll change the availability of health care. It'll change our educational systems. It will change everything about our lives. And those people we have elected to observe the laws of our land are just acting as if they don't notice. The Ukrainian border is more significant than our own. Jesus said false prophets would increase. Prophets are those individuals that are designated to be truthful. I mean, if you're looking for the simplest definition, not the most biblical definition, but a prophet's not just somebody who takes a biblical perspectives and tries to help you understand what God is doing. They're the people you look to tell the truth in our culture. And there's very little truth-telling taking place. A lot of spin, a lot of manipulation. And that's as true within the church as without. I'm not throwing stones at your least favorite media outlet. Jesus said deception will increase. Did anybody have a sense that deception's increasing? Propaganda and censorship have become so normal we don't notice. When they tell us we can't say something in public, we go, oh, okay. They had a gathering at Yale University recently to discuss diversity. And it was disrupted and closed down because the students weren't tolerant of more than one view. Deception will increase. We're so busy. We're just trying to not to pay attention. If we can get what we need and get done what we want to do and vacation where we want to go and it's spring break and can we make this happen, that it'll just work out. It's not my problem, but it is becoming that. The economic upheaval, easy for me to say, the economic upheaval that we've talked about, we see emerging in front of us. Inflation's in double digits. Costs are skyrocketing. We want to blame everybody else, but they're policies that we've put in place. The attitude we have towards work, one of the great strengths of our nation for decade upon decade was our work ethic. It was rooted, it emerged from a biblical worldview. The integrity in that bargain for which we would go to work. And we've watched that be disrupted. Big trouble ahead. With that in mind, I would submit to you, we need to have clarity on which plan we're following. And if you know there's disruption coming and there's conflict around us, you need something of a battle plan. In the military side of it, they say no real plan ever survives your first encounter with the enemy. You can plan as well as you want to, but when you get into the reality of it, everything gets realigned and changed. We're watching that in current world events. Mike Tyson said it a little more plainly. He said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And in church world, we've been guilty of our Bible studies and our small groups and our theoretical discussions and our favorite translations and the styles of worship that we preferred. But we really didn't intend to engage spiritually in what's happening in our world because we had enough stability and enough prosperity and enough opportunity. If the current congregation didn't suit us, we'd just rotate to the one that did. And if we kind of veered off the moral course a little bit and we couldn't get our way by throwing a fit, we'd just find another group where we were less known and we'd connect there. So we had kind of a transient Christianity. But that's not adequate for this season. We're going to have to move our faith from the theoretical. We're going to have to stop discussing whether or not we believe in spiritual forces of wickedness and try to understand how to take a stand against them. I don't believe we any longer have the luxury of having a debate on whether unclean spirits exist and engage with the Christian community, the Christ followers. We're going to have to understand how to address them. We're going to have to stop having debates on what we think the role of the Holy Spirit should be in our lives and try to cooperate to Him with the fullest possible degree that we can. The world has shifted, folks. We're going to have to grow up. Again, the problem isn't the people beyond us. It's been our indifference, our ambivalence. We're pretty good. We're born again. We're baptized. We read our Bibles with some regularity. We go to church. We give some money. I want to make just some simple suggestions for our battle plan. They're probably not new. The first is you have to be alert. And when I say that, if Colonel North was here, he'd talk to you about situational awareness. What I would like to submit to you, for me, what that's grounded in is having the humility to continue to learn. We've got to have the humility to say, I have to grow. I've known God and I've walked with the Lord and I have testimonies and God stories and albums and pictures and relationships. And this was the way we liked to worship at that point. But where we are today, God, I need to know you in a new way. Not easy stuff, because it involves an emotional realignment. It'll involve some relational realignment. It takes tremendous determination to maintain that alertness. In Matthew 25, Jesus said, keep watch. You don't know the day or the hour. We're so smug. We are, and I've spent decades in the church, so I'm not throwing stones. I'm just talking about the folks I hang out with. We got figured out when the rapture is going to take place, and we know the 12 signs that have to happen before that, and we know the 7 keys to hidden something or others. And we named every horn on every beast that came up out of the pool, and we've got our charts, and we know the best translation. And we know the right hour to go to church because that's when the Lord goes. And we're just kind of buttoned up and there's not much room in us. We're not listening to Jesus said, listen, you don't know. We go, well, I think maybe I got a good hint. So let's start with, how about a different kind of awareness? Being alert, the humility to change. I know that's not easy. And secondly, I think we need a caution. In Luke 17, this is Jesus again. He said, just as it was in the days of Noah, so also it will be in the days of the Son of Man. People were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage up till the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. It's a very sobering passage. Destroyed them all. 8 people escaped destruction. Everybody destroyed except 8. That's a bad day. It's a bad month. And there's nothing that's described that's particularly immoral or ungodly. There's not some blatant sin. You could have, everything that it says that were involved in the days of Noah. And I know there's some other passages. We'll look at them in just a moment. But from the perspective where Jesus was delivering this message, the conclusion is the people were unconcerned. Their hearing was impeded by their own pursuits. We know what we want to do. I mean, Noah's building a big boat and he preaches a lot, but we're busy. And Jesus said that they didn't respond until the day they were destroyed. Destruction came. Folks, we don't want to be that group of people. We don't want to be that group of people. Genesis 6 is the Genesis commentary on what Jesus was talking about. It said, the Lord saw how great man's wickedness was in the earth, how it had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. People were fascinated with evil, just captivated by evil, how to raise it to a new height. They weren't particularly interested in the pursuit of God. It's not a great stretch. I don't think we've arrived at that point yet, but if you looked at contemporary behaviors and attitudes, we're fascinated with evil. How to communicate it, how to share it, how to use technology, whatever we can do. And the pursuit of God, we kind of have, even amongst those of us who pursue God, it's like, well, it's kind of a fait accompli. We've got that worked out. Nothing to see here. I mean, we know there's some people that need God, but those of us that have found God, we're pretty much good to go. I mean, we know the world's not very salty and there's a lot of darkness, but it couldn't be the salt and the light's fault. It's got to be their fault. If they're in the darkness, why don't they come stand in the light? Maybe it's because they think we're dim-wits. I don't know. But it wasn't just a one-time event in history. Jesus is warning his audience, in particular about the end of the age. He said it'll be just like it was in the days of Noah. We're going to return to that. So there's going to be a deterioration of human character. So we shouldn't be shocked. We should have a plan for that. It means there's going to be a lot more voices inviting you to less godly behavior, and they're going to have credibility and letters at the end of their names, and they'll be sophisticated, and they will make the appeals from very appealing places. And it's much easier to go along with a group who are being ungodly than having to do it against the tide. The deterioration of human character is going to continue to increase until we get to that point in Revelation where God says, I'm going to make all things new. So you and I better have a plan for withstanding that, or we're going to get caught in that stream. It's why Jesus warned us against deception more than any other single thing. Because it happens to us incrementally, bit by bit, drip by drip, one bad decision after another. Isaiah 63, they rebelled and grieved his Holy Spirit. So he turned and became their enemy, and he himself fought against them. Wow. Isaiah about 500 years before Jesus' birth. So we've got another example, another point in history where God said, my covenant people rebelled against me with such persistence. My spirit was so grieved at his interface with them that I stood in opposition to them. We don't want to be in that place. Peter talks about it so much. I put an extended passage in your notes, but I think we'll look at that later. You know, every service is not the same. Once upon a time, every service was just the same, or just as close to the same as we could land it, and we could land it pretty good. So we'll pick that up another time, which means you'll either have to come back or find YouTube. Because I want to take a minute and talk to you about engagement training. Have you ever had a cast on? Maybe a cast on your arm or a cast on your leg. It doesn't take very long if you're immobile for your muscles to atrophy. I mean, they'll look visibly different. And your strength levels will be different. You may have spent decades gaining that strength in a matter of a few days or weeks. There's a dramatic, just the lack of use brings with it a forfeiture. Well, one of the things I believe we've forfeited in contemporary American evangelicalism is the strength to stand. We just haven't been great standers. Partially because we haven't had to. There was enough residual biblical worldview amongst us that we could flourish without having to stand ourselves. We didn't have to pay much attention to the schools and whether that biblical worldview was being taught in our schools. We didn't even pay attention to our seminaries. Was it being taught in our seminaries? And we just assumed they'd crank out people that were God-honoring, biblically informed, until we realized they hadn't been. And our kids weren't being exposed to the best values. And then we begin to stand up and it's awkward and the muscles are kind of sore and tender and they don't have the strength we need them to have. Well, we're in a place now where we're going to have to stand. Or we will lose what's left of our freedoms and our liberties and our privileges. That's not a threat, that's just the reality we're in. So it seems to me a little dialogue, a little thought around what does it mean to engage when you haven't been. Now, you'll need some help on this because you need a community. It's much easier to make a significant life change if you don't do it alone. You know this fundamentally. How many of you ever made a private decision that tomorrow you'd start a diet? You ever done that? You know, I put on a few, and I think tomorrow would be a good day to start. But since I'm going to go hungry tomorrow, I might as well eat what I want to today. Right? I mean, that's just common sense. I'm going to get all the bad stuff out of the house, and it'd be wasteful to throw it away. So I'm going to eat that gallon of ice cream tonight. Well, and then those cookies that were in there, they need to go too. And, you know, I'm going to stay up a little later because at midnight I'm going on the wagon. And so you don't just carb load, you just load. And you eat all that food. What happens when you wake up in the morning? Oh, God, you're famished. And you're thinking, whew, you know, the devil must have really got into me yesterday. Tricked me into eating all that food with that diet temptation. I got to replenish. I ate all the good stuff in the house. It's a totally different experience that if you tell 4 people that tomorrow this is where we start, and I'm going to write down everything I eat and share it with you. Now you're meddling. And when I think about this list, we're going to need one another. You know, those days when you could slip in quietly and be anonymous and slip out, and you could still manage to maintain your faith. People say to me, Pastor, I don't have to go to church to be a Christian. No, you don't. You truly don't. But I don't believe you'll maintain your faith alone. Christianity is presented us very clearly and persistently as a community experience. We're a body, the scripture says. And the hand can't say to the foot, I don't need you. The hand can say to the foot, I don't like the way you're performing right now, but we need one another. So there's some ideas that I think we're going to have to gain some familiarity with as we engage in this struggle that is emerging and is going to define what is in front of us, I believe. And the first is not a happy thing, but I think grief is a part of it. We're going to have to learn how to grieve. There is remorse over what has been forfeited. You see, there's a cost to every conflict. If you're not certain about that, just watch a little bit of the pictures and the images and the video coming from Ukraine. If Putin withdrew his forces today, the cost is overwhelming. Decades away from any semblance of what it was 6 weeks ago. And grief is an appropriate part of that. And as our world is shifting and our habits are realigning and the opportunities are different, you will grieve some of those things. Because you'll have had some habits that you enjoyed or some patterns that were comfortable and familiar to you, and they're going to be less available. And grief is appropriate. It's a normal response. There's some things that come with that. The stages of grief are not difficult or limited to it. But it'll make you angry, it'll frustrate you. You'll be aware of a sense of loss. Some people experience grief in their life and they're frozen in those places. A tragedy, a life event, a disruption. And I don't want that. We can't stand, we can't complete the course. We can't finish the assignment we've been given. There's going to be blatant demonstrations of evil. The Bible says that Lot was grieved by what happened in the city where he lived, that it vexed his soul. It was bad enough that God sent someone to extract him from that place. And we're going to see increasing, blatant, unrepentant demonstrations of evil. We're not just talking about gender confusion any longer. We're talking about unapologetic disruptions of things that seem impossible. There'll be a realignment of dreams, things that you thought were a part of your future, that you were counting upon. Or maybe they were dreams you've had for children or grandchildren, and as the circumstances change, you'll be angry and resentful and embittered. And if you don't know, if you're not prepared to offload that, it will keep you from standing. There's a second thing I think is essential for our engagement training. We're going to have to be careful to guard both our hope and our faith. Hope is the infrastructure of faith. Hope is the skeletal system of faith. Without the skeleton, you're just a jellyfish. You'll just collapse. We need the infrastructure and not the new definition. See, hope is about the future. Faith is about now. And if you lose your hope for the future, it affects your behavior now. One's not good and the other evil. They're essential components, and you're going to have to guard them and protect them. Look at 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 5. It says, who through faith, it's talking about God's people, who through faith are shielded by God's power. Your faith is a shield. God's power is better than what Scotty could bring up on the Enterprise. God's power shielding your life. What would that look like? Well, it's grounded in your faith. Which plan are you implementing? What are you building your life on? I don't want the polite answer. I don't want the immediate response that's reflexive. If somebody were to look at your calendar and your checkbook and where your money's going and where your time's going, what plan are you following? See, what you do shouts so loud, I can't hear what you say. Who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Jesus is coming back to the earth because if he didn't come back, we would be completely overwhelmed. It's not a picnic he's interrupting. Some of us aren't even sure we want him to come back because we've got plans and dreams and things that we want to do, and he seems like an intrusion. I assure you, before you see him, he will not be an intrusion. Faith and hope. And then the third piece I would give you in this session is that movement is going to be required. It's about the necessity of implementation. We've got to do something. You can't steal second and keep your foot on first. Jesus said the wise person is the one who hears his word and does it. James said we're deceived if we hear the word and we don't do anything with it. He said, you say you believe there's a God. Good for you. The demons believe that, and they at least shudder. We say we believe it, and then we go on our own merry way. So movement is a part of this. But what does that look like? I'm not talking about some dramatic new life plan. One expression of movement, of implementation, is beginning to practice thankfulness in a new way. It says we enter his gates with thanksgiving, we come into his courts with praise. We've got to take time every day to be thankful. What you think about, what you give place to in your thoughts, what you'll watch, is far more important than what's happening in the world around you. Some of you are way too aware of different theories about what's happening in our world. You need to fill your heart with what God said he's going to do. And you need to take time on a daily basis to verbalize it. God, I thank you that I'm your child, that I've been washed in the blood of Jesus, that I'm shielded by your power through my faith in you, that my calendar is yours and my resources are yours. I will order my days as you direct me to do. God, I had a plan, but clearly you're inviting. I want to thank you that I'm not confused or left aside. Because I promise you there's a tape in your head that says you're not making any difference. You're insignificant. It's too hard. The outcomes don't justify the means. Why don't you just give in? Why are you making such an effort to honor the Lord? I won't ask you to stand, but that tape is so universal. The most powerful people you know have that tape in their head. You're not making any difference. It wouldn't make any difference if somebody ungodly was occupying this place. Why are you making that effort to honor the Lord? You can compromise a little bit. You can cheat around the edges. Just nobody's going to know. You're a whole lot better than the person across the street. We're going to have to wake up. We're going to have to wake up. God, I want to give you thanks today. I want to start my day by thanking you that I have the strength to meet a new sunrise, that you've made provision for my life. I have food to eat and clothing for my children, and there's shelter over us, that we're not in the streets looking for a place to hide. God, I want to thank you today. I've taken that for granted. I've just presumed upon it. I've lived in arrogance and pride. I've been like that person building bigger and bigger barns, and I've never been satisfied. I wanted to fly where I used to drive, and when I could fly, I wanted to fly first class, and when I could fly first class, I wanted to fly private. And when I could fly private, I wanted to own the jet. And then I needed a bigger jet because somebody had a bigger one than me. Now, for most of us, that's not a problem, so we can talk about that, and we all feel pretty good about ourselves. But you've got your own sequence. And I struggle with it in my head too. Do we really intend to honor the Lord? Do we give him thanks? Are you really moving with your faith? Are we doing what Jesus said? Which plan are you implementing? I appreciate your testimony from 40 years ago, but what about this week? Are we willing to be different? I know some of us are. Isaiah 61. This was the passage Jesus read when he was in the synagogue in Nazareth. It's the one that got him in so much trouble. Because after he read Isaiah 61, he said, today, this is fulfilled in your hearing. And they tried to kill him. You could have a theoretical Bible study all day long. But if you turn to the covenant people of God and said, let's talk about current events, folks get heated up. It's not that much different today. Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me. The Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom to the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of the vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. Imagine the people of God in ashes. the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They'll be called oaks of righteousness. Before you get to be an oak of righteousness, you're going to have to know something of ashes and mourning and despair. So how do you hold those things at bay so they don't occupy too much of your heart? They can visit temporarily, but you don't want them to move in. You got to practice routinely gratitude, being thankful, verbalizing it, thinking about it, finding the things to be thankful for. But my circumstances are difficult and evil is bumping up against me in some really personal ways. Nevertheless, I will be thankful. If you can't be thankful for your circumstances, you can be thankful for the character of God. God, you are just, and you are faithful, and you are all powerful, and you are all knowing. Nothing is hidden from you. I know you're aware of what's happening in my life tonight, and I give you thanks for that. I choose to take off the spirit of despair. Anoint yourself. Get out your little tin of chapstick, and in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I will put on the garment of praise. I will not give in to the heaviness. I'm not suggesting the circumstances are easy or fun or always comfortable. Now I got a couple of minutes. It's springtime, and we have a unique opportunity. It's the first time in years that we came to the Easter season without a COVID narrative. Hallelujah. I'm thankful. I'm thankful. There's a verse I've read you from Acts 5. It says, day after day in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Christ. I was at a conference a week ago, and the presentation that was most impactful for me that week was a former U.S. senator. And he looked at us and he said, what we've been doing hasn't worked. He said, our commitment has been inadequate. It's going to take more effort. It'll take more resources. It's going to take more determination. We have to acknowledge how ineffective we've been. That our past behaviors have not been adequate for the challenge. And I sat there and I thought, he's right. We forfeited too much. We forfeited too much free speech. We forfeited too much of our freedom of assembly. The list could go on and on. And I kept coming back to that verse in Acts. Day by day, in the temple courts, from house to house, they never stopped. I want to talk to you about something we're going to do together. And if you're watching with us from someplace else, you're welcome. I'm not limiting it. You don't have to speak Southern. I mean, it might help because God loves us, but... I mean, you know the shorthand on that. Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite. I think we can all imagine that to some extent. But there's multiple opportunities in front of us in these next few weeks, but there's really one objective. The opportunities I'm going to present to you will look like Easter mugs with invitations for a neighbor and activities for children across ages, and We the Kingdom is coming, or Ann Wilson is coming, or the Katinas are coming, and we'll have service on Friday or on Saturday or on Sunday, and maybe you can ride with me, or you can come sit with me, or it's a big church, but we'll meet and do it. We'll worship together, and even the least religious amongst us doesn't necessarily want to be left out of an Easter celebration. I wish somebody would invite me, and it's just an opportunity. And we'll do our best to give them a simple presentation of the gospel. And you need to act like you've never heard it. Don't look bored. That story changed my life. That story is still changing my life. That story is more hopeful to me than an election. That story is more hopeful to me than a political party or a political candidate or an economic reversal or an economic opportunity. That story, the gospel is enough. And Easter is about that. But beyond Easter, we're going to take 6 weeks. We're putting up the outdoor stage again. And on Saturday nights, we're going to be outside. Sunday morning, we'll be back inside. Food trucks and guest artists are coming. They're listed on your Easter. It's a 6-week set of opportunities. It's not the only opportunity. It's just a window of time we can put together. But there's really an objective in the midst of those opportunities. It really isn't about an Easter worship service. The objective is far more significant. It's about your ability and my ability to have a faith discussion. We brought our faith into the building, and in this place, we'll raise our hands, we'll clap, we'll go, yes, preach it, Pastor. You'll collect outlines, you'll have an opinion, you'll do comparative analysis between this church and the 4 others that you kind of pay attention to as well. But we leave it in that box. Because when we're doing business, we understand there's a language for that. If you bring your faith into that conversation, there could be repercussions. People might talk about you. You may pray over your food if you're sitting with somebody in your small group from church or somebody that you serve with at church. But if you're in a group and you don't know them, you're not going to introduce prayer because you understand intuitively the resentment to your faith. It doesn't have to be expressed overtly. You understand that there's a price to be paid if you're perceived as being a little too Christian. So we've shut down. We're covert operatives. We want to be perceived as inclusive and tolerant. Really? Well, the ground at the foot of the cross is level. Everybody's welcome. But God is not tolerant of ungodliness. He will tolerate the ungodly until we hear the truth. But having heard the truth, He expects compliance. And you and if I was looking for one place to help us make a significant difference in the spread of the gospel, it would be our willingness to have a faith discussion. We learned to do let's pray. We could introduce a sentence prayer to most settings. Now we're going to learn to let's talk. Let me tell you what Jesus did in my life. Now, they don't need a 4-hour presentation. If you can't tell a God story in 90 seconds, work on it until you can. But you need a 90-second God story. And it doesn't have to be, my ear got cut off in the garden and Jesus touched my ear and healed it. Your God story could be, I just used to think Christians were nuts, and now I've become one of them. And I'm really grateful I have. Or the truth is, I used to pretend to be a Christian, but in my heart, I was full of all kinds of junk. You've worked with me, you know I was. Because if they've worked with you, they know you were. Integrity, authenticity comes from trying to line up what you say and what you do more and more consistently. It's a struggle for all of us, but it's the target. Let's talk. See, if we'll take our faith outside, we just built some activities. So you can say, hey, our goofy pastor, they put up the stage outside. But there's food trucks. You can have something to eat and ignore him. And about the time you finish with your food, there's going to be a concert. And the people singing are really pretty good. Why don't you come? We'll have a concert in springtime in Tennessee. I'll buy dinner. Come in my car. We'll save enough money on gas to pay for dinner. Let's talk. We've got to be willing to have those conversations. But the beginning point is to acknowledge how reluctant we've been. We didn't want to be labeled as those fanatics, those crackpots, those goofy people, that World Outreach. I heard those people pray for the sick and cast out demons and speak in tongues. Yes. And we're trying to find better ways to be goofy for Jesus. Wouldn't you like to be one of those people? Well, I'm not sure, but a faith discussion. I believe we can serve more people at Easter and more people over those few weeks. The only way that works is if you help. I have to preach the sermons whether you help or not. So it's not really like I'm not going to twinkle more. Or I won't be any better. Sorry. But collectively, our enthusiasm for the Lord can make a difference in our community. And if we'll do that, it'll make a difference far beyond our community. I brought you a prayer. We're going to keep talking about this and some practical things around it. don't you stand with me? We can read this prayer together. It's from 2 Thessalonians. I adapted it from 2 Thessalonians. Hope you're doing the Bible reading with us. It's really been good lately. Have you found it? Let's pray together. Almighty God, we constantly pray that you may count us worthy of your calling, and that by your power you may fulfill every good purpose and every act prompted by our faith. We pray this so that the name of our Lord Jesus may be glorified, according to the grace of our God and the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Hallelujah. God bless you. Hey, this is Pastor Allen. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, like it, and most importantly, share it with your friends. If you want to be notified when there's new content, when we post new material, if you'll just subscribe to my channel and hit the bell, you'll get the notification. Most of all, I pray God blesses you as you continue on your spiritual journey and open your heart to the Lord. God bless.